Hello, dear students. I welcome you all to another masterclass session on botany with us at Sparkl. And in today's session, we will be discussing another two very important chapters for your NEET exam. So the chapters are organism and population along with ecosystem. Okay, so in today's session, we will be discussing questions which are relevant to NEET. एंड बेटा इन दोनों चैप्टर्स में आपको ऑफ कोर्स काफी सारी चीजें हैं जो मेमोराइज करनी पड़ेंगी सो वी विल बी डिस्कसिंग दोस कॉन्सेप्ट्स एंड क्वेश्चंस so are you ready for the session? Let's begin. So the first question that we will be discussing today is here on your screen. The question says the 10% energy transfer law of food chain was given by. Now beta ये जो 10% energy transfer law है, it was first given by Lindman in the year 1942. And what does this law state? So this law particularly says that uh, the during that the transfer of energy from one tropic level to the another tropic level, 90% of the energy is lost in form of heat, and only 10% of energy is passed on from one tropic level to the another tropic level. Okay, so this was given by Lindemann. So the correct option answer here would be option B. Clear? Let us move on to the next question. Okay, so the next question says in food chain, maximum energy is stored in. Okay, so what is the food chain, beta? In food chain, if you see that the producers which are present at the T1 tropic level, these occupy the first tropic level, T1, and they capture the solar energy directly to synthesize the organic matter or what you call as the food. Now this food is being consumed by the herbivores. Okay, so here as we know that the energy keeps on decreasing, only 10% of energy is being passed on from one tropic level to the another successive tropic levels. So जो maximum energy है बेटा वो T1 tropic level के पास रहेगी, and these are producers. So the correct answer here would be option A. And as we go up on these tropic levels, energy धीरे धीरे कम store होने लगती है. Okay, let us move on to the next question then. The question says all of the following are the chemicals secreted by plants as defense against grazers. Grazers जो आपके herbivores होते हैं. Except, so यहाँ पे बेटा अगर आप देखेंगे जो पेनिसिलिन को छोड़ के बाकी सारे जो ऑप्शंस हैं, these are examples of classic alkaloid secondary metabolites. Okay, so these are produced by various plants. And why are these chemicals produced? So that they can avoid these grazers to feed on these plants. Okay, so penicillin जो यहाँ पे है बेटा आप देखोगे ये आपका alkaloid नहीं है. Penicillin क्या है? It is an antibiotic which is synthesized and secreted by penicillin. Okay, clear? So let us move on to the next question. Next question says which of the following adaptations is not acquired by parasites? पैरासाइट्स क्या होते हैं बेटा? नाउ अगर आप पैरासिटिक इंट्रैक्शन देखोगे यहाँ पे एक ऑर्गेनिज्म जो होता है वो होस्ट पर फीड करता है. ओके, होस्ट के ऊपर डिपेंडेंट होता है अपने सर्वाइवल के लिए, अपने फूड के लिए. तो यहाँ पे क्वेश्चन पूछ रहा है कि इनमें से कौन सा अडेप्टेशन यू वोंट बी सीइंग इन केस ऑफ और व्हिच इज नॉट एक्वायर्ड बाय पैरासाइट्स. सो लेट अस लुक एट द ऑप्शंस. फर्स्ट ऑप्शन says लॉस ऑफ unnecessary सेंस ऑर्गन्स. ना यहाँ पे बेटा पैरासाइट जब होस्ट की बॉडी में चला जाता है वो डायरेक्टली कोई भी उसको ज्यादा सेंस ऑर्गन्स की जरूरत नहीं पड़ती. फूड भी जो वो कैप्चर करता है, कंज्यूम करता है, वो जो होस्ट का डाइजेस्टेड फूड है वो कैप्चर करता है, तो इसीलिए उसे डाइजेस्टिव सिस्टम की भी जरूरत नहीं होती. अननेसेसरी सेंस ऑर्गन्स आर रिमूव्ड. प्रेजेंस ऑफ एडेसिव ऑर्गन्स आर देयर. सकर्स एंड हुक्स के फॉर्म में पैरासाइट के अंदर मॉडिफिकेशंस देखे जाते हैं. ओके, और अगर हम बात करें रिप्रोडक्टिव कैपेसिटी की तो बेटा रिप्रोडक्टिव कैपेसिटी लो नहीं होती, इंक्रीज हो जाती है, बहुत ही ज्यादा हाई हो जाती है. व्हाई? because these parasites, they face immense challenges to successfully locate themselves to infect this host. So they have to increase their reproductive capacity. So इस question के according हमारा correct answer would be option D. Clear? Let us look at the next question. Select the odd one out with respect to sexual descent seen in case of Ophrys and bee. Now, what is Ophrys beta? It is a Mediterranean orchid और ये बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग एग्जाम्पल है. यहाँ पे हमें स्यूडो पॉपुलेशन देखने को मिलता है. ना यहाँ पे होता क्या है बेटा, ये देखिए. जो ऑर्किड है, दिस पर्टिकुलर ऑर्किड वांट्स इट टू बी गेट पॉलिनेटेड, तो ये बी के ऊपर डिपेंडेंट होता है. नाउ दिस पर्टिकुलर बी, मेल बी, ये अट्रैक्ट होती है इस ऑर्किड से बाय लुकिंग एट दी वन ऑफ द पेटल व्हिच मिमिक्स द फीमेल बी. सो यहाँ पे दिस पर्टिकुलर ऑर्किड इज बेसिकली अट्रैक्टिंग दिस बी टू pollinate itself. Now यहाँ पे अगर आप ऑप्शंस देखोगे तो फर्स्ट ऑप्शन says the organism exhibits this type of interaction also shows co-evolution. So this is absolutely correct statement बेटा. हनी बी में कोई चेंज, यहाँ पे बी में कोई चेंज आएगा, दिस ऑर्किड ऑल्सो नीड्स टू चेंज इट सेल्फ सो दैट ये एक जो कनेक्शन है पॉलिनेट करने का वो बना रहे. Look at the B option. All petals of the flower bear an uncanny resemblance to the male bee. पहली बात तो बेटा सारे पेटल्स नहीं रिजेंबल करते, ओनली वन ऑफ द पेटल रिजेंबल्स टू दी फीमेल बी एंड नॉट द मेल बी. सो यहाँ पे बी स्टेटमेंट जो है वो हमारा ऑड वन आउट हो जाता है. लेट अस लुक एट द अदर ऑप्शंस आल्सो. Option C says pseudo copulation can be observed during this interaction. Yes, absolutely. Okay. D option says this is a strategy adopted for pollination. Definitely. This is a very specialized evolution strategy that is designed to achieve pollination in case of this Ophrys. Clear? Let us move on to the next question then. Select the incorrect statement with respect to predators. Now, बेटा यहाँ पे इस चैप्टर में there are lot of interactions which are given, चाहे आप predation बोले, commensalism बोले, amensalism बोले, mutualism बोले. Now, आपको इन सारे interactions के बारे में पता होना चाहिए because these type of questions can be asked in your NEET exam along with the examples which are mentioned here. Okay, in NCERT of course. So यहाँ पे क्वेश्चन आपसे प्रीडेटर्स के बारे में पूछ रहा है, सिमिलरली आपसे प्रीडेशन के बारे में क्वेश्चंस पूछे जा सकते हैं. सो लेट अस लुक एट द फीचर्स जो यहाँ पे दे रखे हैं एंड ट्राई टू फाइंड आउट व्हाट द करेक्ट आंसर इज. फर्स्ट ऑप्शन सेज दे आर अनेबल टू कंट्रोल प्रे पॉपुलेशन. बेटा प्रीडेटर्स जो होते हैं ये प्रे पॉपुलेशन को चेक में रखते हैं, कंट्रोल में रखते हैं. तो यहाँ ये जो स्टेटमेंट है हमारी इनकरेक्ट स्टेटमेंट हो जाती है with respect to predators. Okay, let us look at the other options also. Option B says they are the conduit for energy transfer across trophic levels. So this is a correct statement because predators, they act as a vital conduits of the transfer of energy. Why? Because the fixed solar energy has to be moved at the higher tropic levels, in which predators do play a very important role. Let us look at option C. Herbivores in a broad ecological context are not very different from predators. Now, this is again a correct statement because broadly speaking, uh, herbivores, they basically consume and destroy live plant tissue. So they can functionally be identical to predators. Let us look at the last option. They help in maintaining species diversity in community. Yes, this is also a correct statement because they keep dominant prey species in check, and that is why they prevent intra-species competition among the prey. Clear? Let us look at the next question. Select the odd one out with respect to evolution of various adaptations in prey. Now predation से बचने के लिए बेटा जो prey होता है वो भी अपने अंदर adaptations लेके आता है. Now what are these different types of adaptation that you see? सबसे पहला टाइप तो अगर आप देखोगे बेटा predation में तो there can be morphological adaptations which are built by the predators, prey. Let us look at the first option here and then find out the answer. First option says cryptic appearance of an organism similar to the surrounding. Yes, this is seen in case of prey, because this is a very classic anti predator adaptation. Okay, so that has evolved by the prey over generations. And cryptic appearance, you can also call it as camouflage. Okay. Second option says temporary change in the preference of food. So this is not an adaptation that the prey is acquiring uh, in terms of this interaction. ऑप्शन सी says resemblance of one organism to another. So ये जो है बेटा, इसे हम mimicry भी बोल सकते हैं. Again, this is seen in case of some of the prey. If you look at the fourth option, it says concealing form as well as coloration. Yes, this is also seen in prey to protect themselves from the predators. Okay, let us move on to the next question. Next question says all of the following are true for ecological pyramid except. So let us look at the options. It does not take into account the same species belonging to two or more tropic level. Now this is a correct statement for ecological pyramid, क्योंकि बेटा यहाँ पे अ, अगर एक स्पीशीज T1 ट्रॉपिक लेवल पे है और there's another species at T2 tropic level, T3 tropic level, like birds. They can be herbivores also, they can be consumers, secondary consumers also. Now यहाँ पे in ecological pyramid हम we cannot take into account the same species belonging to two tropic level at the same time. Okay. Second option says it assumes a simple food chain. So this is also a correct statement regarding ecological pyramid. It believes that okay, food web का concept वो consider नहीं करते. It assumes that there's a simple food chain going on from T1 tropic level to T4, T5 tropic levels. Okay, let us look at option number C. Saprophytes are not given any place in ecological pyramid. Yes, that is also true. Saprophytes or decomposers, they are completely excluded from ecological pyramids. Okay. If you look at option D, it says the base of each pyramid always represents the consumer. बेटा consumers जो होते हैं वो T2 tropic level से start होते हैं. Here herbivores are primary consumers, then you have secondary consumer. But जो T1 tropic level है, जो base है pyramid का, this is formed by the producers, the plants in general. Okay. So you must remember the exceptions which are there in case of ecological pyramids, and what are the different types of ecological pyramid. इस पे भी बेटा questions frame हो सकते हैं आपको नीट में. Clear? Let us move on to the next question. So next question says the rate of decomposition of organic matter is quicker if. Now यहाँ पे बेटा अगर आप देखोगे decomposition कब fast होती है. So अगर किसी भी detritus का डिकम्पोजिशन अगर हमें देखना है फास्टर कब होगा, सो उसके लिए हमें एक ऑप्टिमल टेम्परेचर चाहिए. टेम्परेचर हैज टू बी वार्म, it has to be humid in the surroundings, there has to be proper aeration in the soil, aerated soil must be there. Okay, and if you want to accelerate this process, हमारा जो detritus है, it has to be rich in nitrogen and water soluble compounds. Okay, so now let us see options में हमें कौन सा correct option मिलता है. Temperature is low and soil has less moisture content. ये बेटा डिकम्पोजिशन को फास्टर नहीं करेगा और स्लो डाउन करेगा. B option says detritus is rich in nitrogen water soluble substance. Definitely yes, we just mentioned कि अगर आपका detritus nitrogen water soluble compound से rich है, then the decomposition rate is much faster. Okay. Option C says dry conditions and low temperature will not promote decomposition. Detritus is rich in lignin and chitin. This will slow down the process of decomposition. Okay. Clear? So it if the detritus is rich in lignin and chitin, it is at a much slower pace. Clear? Let us move on to the next question. Next question says, what percentage of PAR is captured by plants to sustain the entire living world? Now, what is PAR? PAR is photosynthetically active radiation. Now, यहाँ पे बेटा टोटल परसेंटेज ऑफ पार जो प्लांट कैप्चर करते हैं दैट इज 2 to 10%. टोटल सोलर इंसिडेंट रेडिएशन में से पार कितना होता है दैट इज 50%. एंड उसपे जो प्लांट कैप्चर करते हैं दैट इज 2 to 10%. सो यू हैव टू मेमोराइज दिस number over here for this particular question. Clear? Let us move on to the next question. Next question says secondary consumer in an ecosystem. So secondary consumer के लिए कौन सा statement correct है? Let us find out. First option says occupies the second tropic level. Now बेटा जो secondary consumer है T1 producers at the first tropic level, T2 primary consumers at the second tropic level which are herbivores directly feeding on the producers, T3 that is the secondary consumers जो कि हम carnivores जिन्हें बोलते हैं. Now these are at the third tropic level, not at the second tropic level. Okay, second tropic level पे कौन रहेंगे बेटा? Second tropic level पे हम देखेंगे herbivores को, primary consumers. Second option says is said to be primary carnivore. Now here this is a correct statement because secondary consumer primary carnivore hai. Okay. Third option says can occupy the first tropic level. No, not at all. वो तो हमेशा producers ही रहेंगे because they have the ability to fix the solar energy into and convert it into organic matter, food. The option says is herbivorous animal. Not at all. Is it clear? Let us move on to the next question then. Next question says it's a statement based question. They're asking which of the statement is correct. So statement A says humus is amorphous, dark colored substance. Statement B says humus undergoes decomposition at an extremely slow rate. Now यहाँ पे बेटा जो statement A and statement B है ये दोनों statements absolutely true है, correct है. क्यों? क्योंकि what is humus? Humus जो होता है बेटा यहाँ पे आप याद रखना humus is an amorphous dark colored colloidal substance, and because it is highly complex and resistant to microbial attack it undergoes decomposition at a very slow rate. Now इससे फायदा क्या होता है यहाँ पे it basically acts as nutrient reservoir for the soil. Okay, let us move on to the next question. Which of the following is an example of an ectoparasite? Now, what are see parasites are of two types: ectoparasite and endoparasite. Endo and ectoparasites. Endoparasites are the one जहां पे parasite आपको host के body के अंदर मिलेगा. Ectoparasites are the one जहां पे जो parasite है वो host के body के ऊपर आपको दिखेगा. Okay. Now, if you look at the first option, यहाँ पे lice on human hair, ये सारे के सारे जो हैं बेटा these are ectoparasites. Ectoparasite. Endoparasite क्या करेगा बेटा? It lives inside the host body, चाहे वो किसी organ में हो चाहे किसी tissue में हो, but it will be residing inside the body of host. Okay, human intestines में tapeworm का presence is an example of endoparasite. Okay, rest other options these are ectoparasites. कास्क्यूटा की अगर आप बात करें, दीज आर ए क्लोरोफिलस प्लांट्स, जहां पे क्लोरोफिल नहीं होता, दे कैन नॉट परफॉर्म देयर, कैनॉट सिंथेसाइज देयर ओन फूड, ऑटोट्रॉपिक नहीं है बेटा, तो इसीलिए होस्ट प्लांट पे डिपेंडेंट है अपने न्यूट्रिएंट के लिए. क्लियर? लेट अस मूव ऑन टू द नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन. Next question is asking about the interaction between fig tree and the wasp. So, as I mentioned, आपको नीट में questions interactions पे आ सकते हैं along with the examples which are mentioned in NCERT. So, you must memorize all the examples जो आपको organism and population chapter में mentioned है. यहाँ पे हम देखते हैं फिग ट्री एंड वॉस्प किसका एग्जाम्पल है. सो इट्स अ डायरेक्ट क्वेश्चन. आपको सबसे पहले तो ये पता होना चाहिए फिग ट्री एंड वॉस्प का क्या इंटरेक्शन है. ना वॉस्प जो होता है वो फिग ट्री के जो फ्रूट्स है उनमें रिसाइड करता है, एग ले करता है, एंड इन रिटर्न जो आपका फिग ट्री में जो फ्रूट है, दैट फ्लावर है, दैट इज पॉलिनेटेड. सो यहाँ पे एक म्यूचुअलिस्टिक एसोसिएशन देखने को मिलता है, एंड दिस म्यूचुअलिस्टिक एसोसिएशन इज ऑब्लिगेट म्यूचुअलिज्म. व्हाई? बिकॉज फिग ट्री को पॉलिनेट करने के लिए उसका स्पेसिफिक वॉस्प भी लगता है, एंड दैट पर्टिकुलर वॉस्प कैन ले इट्स एग इनसाइड द फिग ट्री ओनली. ओके, सो यहाँ पे दिस इज अ पॉजिटिव इंटरेक्शन वेयर both the species which are interacting with each other are being benefited from one another. Okay, next question says, which characteristics is unique to brood parasitism? Now, what is brood parasitism, beta? It is a specialized behavioral phenomena seen in case of birds, and you will see it in case of cuckoo or quail, and its interaction with crow. So what it does, the cuckoo lays its egg inside the nest of a crow, and the crow is going to, after a point of time, it is going to nurture and nourish the eggs, the babies of the cuckoo. Okay, so यहाँ पे brood parasitism है. क्या हो रहा है यहाँ पे? One member is being benefited, the other one is being harmed. So यहाँ पे let us look at the options. क्या unique feature है brood parasitism में? First option says the parasite depends on the host for shelter and nutrition. Okay. Now हमें अपना आंसर जो है स्पेसिफिकली पैरासिटिज्म पे ना करके ब्रूड पैरासिटिज्म के बारे में पता लगाना है. क्लियर? तो डेफिनेटली पैरासाइट होस्ट पे डिपेंड करता है फॉर शेल्टर एंड न्यूट्रिशन, बट लेट अस लुक एट द अदर ऑप्शंस आल्सो. वी हैव टू फाइंड आउट द मोस्ट अप्रोप्रिएट आंसर ओवर हियर. Second option says the parasite lays its egg in the nest of another birds. कुकू कोयल जो होती है वो क्रो के नेस्ट में अपने एग्स लेकर देती है, एंड क्रो इनके बेबीज को नर्चर करेगा. ओके, सो यहाँ पे बी ऑप्शन जो है वो मेरा मोस्ट अप्रोप्रिएट करेक्ट स्टेटमेंट होगा. ठीक है, लेट अस लुक एट द अदर ऑप्शंस आल्सो. व्हाई दे आर इनकरेक्ट? द पैरासाइट इज ऑलवेज एंडोपैरासिटिक. नो बेटा, ठीक है, यहाँ तो एंडोपैरासिटिज्म की बात है ही नहीं. द होस्ट इज ऑलवेज किल्ड. नो, नॉट एट ऑल. होस्ट को किल नहीं किया जा रहा है. होस्ट को तो आपको यहाँ पे आप बेनिफिट उठा रहे हो. होस्ट रहेगा तो ही आप जो कोयल है वो अपने प्रोजेनी को नरिश करवा पाएगी ग्रो से. क्लियर? So it is simply tricked into expending, the crow is tricked into expending energy to raise progenies of cuckoo. That's it. It is not killed. Clear? Let us move on to the next question. Next question says the pre-reproductive age group is smaller than the reproductive age group in an age pyramid. The population is likely to be. Now बेटा अगर हम age pyramid देखें तो यहाँ पे सबसे बेस में होते हैं प्री रिप्रोडक्टिव ग्रुप, उसके ऊपर होता है रिप्रोडक्टिव एज ग्रुप, एंड अबव दैट यू हैव पोस्ट reproductive group. Now, question here says that the pre-reproductive age group is smaller than the reproductive one. So basically, the base is smaller, and here we have the reproductive age group. So ये क्या डिपिक्ट कर रहा है, कैसी पॉपुलेशन लाइकली हमें रिजल्ट करेगा. सो नाउ इस केस में बेटा पॉपुलेशन जो है वो डिक्लाइनिंग पॉपुलेशन की तरह बिहेव करेगी. व्हाई? बिकॉज if the pre-reproductive segment, the base, is significantly narrower or smaller than the current reproductive segment, it means that the fewer individuals will step up to reproduce for the next generation. And what will happen? Ultimately, this will result in declining the population. Okay. एंड यहाँ पे अगर हम पिरामिड की बात करें तो किस टाइप का पिरामिड देखने को मिलेगा? यू विल सी एन अर्थ शेप्ड पिरामिड। ओके, सो यहाँ पे एज पिरामिड के साथ जैसे एक्सपैंडिंग पिरामिड में यू विल सी एन अपराइट ट्रायंगुलर शेप। ओके, तो आपको ये शेप्स भी याद रखने हैं विद रिस्पेक्ट टू कि क्या एज पिरामिड में क्या शेप देखने को मिलेगा। क्लियर? लेट अस मूव ऑन टू द नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन देन। Question says browsers do not feed on calotropis plant because, so browsers calotropis plant को क्यों consume नहीं करते? Let us look at the reasons. So the first statement here says because of the presence of long spines and thorns. तो बेटा जो कैलोट्रोपिस है उसमें स्पाइन्स और थॉर्न्स का प्रेजेंस होता ही नहीं है. So this is not the way that this calotropis plant will push these browsers away from it. So ये मेरा correct option नहीं रहेगा. It has sweet taste. No, not at all. In case of calotropis, what we see is highly poisonous cardiac glycosides. Now, what do these glycosides do? So, calotropis beta एक weed है, and it basically has a very powerful chemical defense mechanism. So, the chemical that it is producing is a cardiac glycoside. Okay, chemical defense mechanism. Okay, so when the cattle, goat or cow, if any such herbivore, if they consume it, so these cardiac glycosides, their cardiac physiology is basically hampered, and they have a severe risk of getting sick. So that's why they tend to stay away from this particular plant. It produces opium and caffeine? No, not at all. Clear? So let us move on to the next question. Next question says talks about exponential growth. So we have two types of growth model, exponential growth model and logistic growth model. So here the question is asking about exponential growth model. In the similar way in your NEET exam, question can be asked with respect to logistic growth model also. So यहाँ पे let us look at the options. First option says this model is considered more realistic than logistic growth one. Now, exponential one is not logistic, but is not realistic. The logistic growth model is more realistic, which believes that the resources are limited in nature, not unlimited. Exponential growth model बोलता है कि unlimited resources है, so it is not realistic. Clear? Let us look at option B. Is affected by environmental resistances. एक्सपोनेंशियल ग्रोथ मॉडल बेटा इन्वायरमेंटल रेजिस्टेंस से नहीं अफेक्ट होता, रादर लॉजिस्टिक ग्रोथ मॉडल अफेक्ट होता है. लेट अस लुक एट द थर्ड ऑप्शन. रिजल्ट्स इन जे शेप्ड ग्रोथ कर्व. यस, अगर हम एक्सपोनेंशियल ग्रोथ की बात करें तो ये जे शेप ग्रोथ कर्व दिखाता है. एंड अगर हमें क्वेश्चन आएगा लॉजिस्टिक ग्रोथ कर्व के लिए तो हियर यू विल सी अ सिग्मोइड ग्रोथ कर्व. ओके, wherein you have a carrying capacity of environment. Clear? Let us look at the last option. Occurs under limited resource conditions. Here the conditions are unlimited. That is why it is an exponential growth. There's an exponential growth. Clear? Let us move on to the next question. Okay, so here also remember that you will have in exponential growth model we assume that there is zero environmental resistance. Okay, next question talks about MacArthur, and it's an assertion region type of question. Assertion says MacArthur showed that 5 warbler species coexisted on a single tree. Reason says that they had a difference in foraging behavior. Now beta जो warbler species हैं एक ही tree पे they had different foraging behaviors, and this is a correct statement. Okay, now यहाँ पे MacArthur जो थे Robert MacArthur, he basically disproved Gauss's कॉम्पिटिटिव एक्सक्लूजन प्रिंसिपल, ओके, जहां पे बोला गया है गॉस के कॉम्पिटिटिव एक्सक्लूजन प्रिंसिपल में दैट व्हेन टू स्पीशीज आर इंटरेक्टिंग, आर competing with each other, then they cannot sustain together for a very long period of the time. The superior one will keep on dominating, and the inferior one will be eliminated, excluded from the environment. Okay, so यहाँ पे मैक आर्थर ने बोला कि what happened with the warbler species, these bird species, that they tend to live on a single tree, and he found that these warbler species, they basically avoided competition, they avoid competing with each other, and they coexisted due to one very important thing called resource partitioning. Resource partitioning, and especially they develop this subtle differences in their foraging behavior and active feeding times. Okay, so that is why they were able to survive together at the same time, feeding on the same resource. Clear? So here both assertion and region are true, and region is correctly explaining the assertion. Clear? Let us move on to the next question. The question here basically is asking you to find out again the growth models, which graph is being represented by the one given here. So if you see, there's a equation that they've mentioned, dn upon dt is equals to rn. So this equation will result in which growth curve? So यहाँ पे बेटा ये जो equation है, you have to memorize the equations for exponential and logistic growth curves. So यहाँ पे this particular equation is for J shaped growth curve, and this is what you see in case of exponential growth. So the correct answer here would be option C. And if you talk about S shape or sigmoid, S shape or sigmoid growth curve, which is seen in case of logistic growth model, then you will see a sigmoid graph, and here the equation is depicted as dn upon dt is equals to rn k minus n upon k. So this is also what you need to remember. Okay, clear? Let us move on to the next question. Next question here talks about population interaction and says where one species is harmed and the other is unaffected, neither harmed nor benefited. So where do you see such type of interaction? So the first option here talks about amensalism. Now amensalism beta wo interaction hai wherein if you talk about two species, species A and B, so one species is neither harmed nor benefited and the other one is harmed. So yes, this becomes our correct option over here. If I talk about commensalism, in commensalism beta, there is a positive zero interaction wherein one species is benefited, just opposite to commensalism, and the other one is neither harmed nor benefited. If I talk about predation or parasitism, here one species is benefited, the other is harmed in both predation and parasitism. Okay, clear? So here the parasite is benefited and the host is being harmed. If I talk about predation, the predator is benefited and the prey is harmed. It is getting killed. Okay. Let us move on to the next question. Okay. So again, you have a assertion region type of question. Assertion says net primary productivity, you can also write it as NPP, is always greater than gross primary productivity, GPP, in an ecosystem. Reason says the production of organic matter by consumers in an ecosystem is termed secondary productivity. Now, beta, यहाँ पे अगर आप assertion देखेंगे तो this is not a correct statement. How do you represent NPP? How do you write it? NPP is equivalent to gross primary productivity minus R. What is R over here? R is respiratory loss. So here, if you talk about GPP, so GPP is always greater than N net primary productivity or NPP, making the assertion an incorrect statement. Okay. Now, if you talk about the reason over here, so reason is is a correct statement. Yes, the production of organic matter by the consumers, not the producers. By the consumers in an ecosystem, it is called secondary productivity. Primary productivity is the one which is seen in case of which the producers produce. Okay, clear? Let us move on to the next question then. Okay, so the question here is again asking about decomposition. Mineralization by microorganisms results in release of. Now, what happens during mineralization? So, in beta, in decomposition, you have multiple steps. So, one of the step is mineralization, and mineralization is the final stage. So, this basically here, in this particular stage, in the final stage of mineralization, where specialized soil microbes, they break down the organic matter of the humus to release the basic inorganic nutrients. Okay, so यहाँ पे बेटा जो हमारा correct option होगा, that will be option B, wherein the mineralization by microbes, it results in the release of inorganic nutrients from humus. Okay, so this inorganic nutrients, they basically go back into the soil solution. Okay, let us move on to the next question. Net primary productivity is calculated as. So net primary productivity basically represents the actual biomass which is available to consumers. Biomass available to consumers. Okay. So it is calculated as NPP is equals to gross primary productivity minus R. Okay. So this is one such formula that you need to remember. Let us move on to the next question. The next question here is again of population interaction. The question says in an orchid growing as an epiphyte on mango branch, orchid benefits while mango is unaffected. This interaction is, so here one is being benefited, the other one is nor harmed or nor benefited. So ये जो interaction होता है बेटा, that is commensalism. This is another one example for commensalism. अगर हम बात करें म्यूचुअलिज्म की, यहाँ पे both the species are benefited. Okay, if you talk about parasitism, plus minus interaction, and what was amensalism? It is a negative zero interaction. Negative zero means one is organism is being harmed and the other one is not benefited nor harmed at all. Okay, let us move on to the next question. Okay, so here the question talks about the ecological pyramids. So the ecological pyramid of biomass. So there's ecological pyramid of biomass. There is ecological pyramid of energy. There is ecological pyramid for numbers. So here the question is asking about the biomass pyramid in a sea and says the pyramid is typically, generally it is. So in case of ecological pyramid of biomass, it is inverted. Okay, why inverted? In an open ocean or marine ecosystem, the standing crop biomass of primary producers. Now, what are the primary producers in case of sea or oceans or aquatic conditions? You have phytoplanktons. Phytoplanktons are there, microscopic uh, phytoplanktons, and their biomass is quite small at any given moment. However, they reproduce and turn over very quickly to support much larger biomass of zooplanktons, which feed upon the phytoplanktons, and smaller fishes. Then you have smaller fishes consuming on zooplanktons, and so on and so forth. You have larger predatory fishes. So this results in an inverted pyramid of biomass in case of aquatic ecosystem. Clear? And if the questions asks about which ecological pyramid is always upright, so remember the pyramid of energy is always upright. Why? Because from T2, T1 tropic level to T2, T3, and T4, as you go up to the successive tropic level, the energy keeps on reducing. The 10% loss states that 90% of energy is being lost, and only the 10% of energy passes on to the next tropic level and is stored inside in the flesh. Okay, so that energy always upright is pyramid of energy without any exception in all ecosystems. Clear? So, students, that was all for today's session. I hope you enjoyed the session and you found it productive. Now, the next thing that you need to do after this session is to go and read your NCRT, memorize all the examples, all the population interactions which are mentioned there, because every single year you will find one or two questions based on these concepts. So, see you in the next session. All the very best.